Every neighborhood has a heartbeat, a place that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core. In Boston's historic North End, that place is Boston Barber and Tattoo Company. Boston Barber and Tattoo Company has become home to A-list Boston celebrities like Gordon Hayward, Milan Lucic, Brad Marchand, and Aaron Baines. Boston Barber and Tattoo is more than just Boston's most well-known corner barbershop. It's also a tourist attraction for the hundreds and thousands of people that visit the North End throughout the year. Boston Barber and Tattoo, a North End landmark that represents the cultural epicenter of the area at its core, located at 113 Salem Street.
Welcome to another edition of Good and Plenty. I'm your host, Jeff Goodman, and it is Tuesday, which means we are here to talk NBA, and we'll do it with my co-host slash producer, Evan Valente, and we'll hit on a bunch of topics here. We'll talk a little bit about the Bulls disaster with Jim Boylan. We'll talk a little bit about DeMarcus Cousins' impending return, what the hell is wrong with the Houston Rockets, and also the surprise team in the NBA this season. But first, remember to subscribe to the show. You can do that on iTunes, Stitcher, CLNS Media. You can also follow me at Goodman Hoops on Twitter. You can find me at watchstadium.com as well. Please give us your reviews. It is Tuesday, which means it's an NBA edition. You can excuse my voice, which is struggling a little bit, Evan Valente, because I took a late red-eye flight home from Phoenix 2 nights ago that was supposed to leave at midnight. It did not leave until 2:45 a.m., which was a little brutal.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound good at all, Jeff. That sounds like torture. Like, I'm not gonna lie, dude. I had a really great night of sleep last night. I'm feeling very energized this morning. I got my cup of coffee. I'm ready to go. I sound much better than you do, for sure.
Much better. No, it's gonna be an effort.
Although now that you're home, you must be enjoying the fact that you're home. You're on the road. You've been on the road a ton this year.
Yeah, but you can't complain. I was in San Diego, LA, and Phoenix in this last trip.
Oh,
so,
yeah, okay.
Like, the weather was good. I went out. I went out one night with Adam Morrison in Scottsdale. The hard part was when the flight got delayed to like 2:45. It was actually delayed to 2:58, and then it ended up leaving at 2:45. I was like, all right, what am I gonna do? So the first thing I did, because I had just finished seeing the Gonzaga-Tennessee game, and then Nevada played, so I had some time to kill. I got some food, and then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go to the casino. I'm gonna go to this Talking Stick Casino up north. I'd never been a little bit north of Phoenix, so I went there. Lost some money, then I'm like, all right, I'll see a movie. 10:30 movie. I'm like, that'll either keep me up or put me asleep.
Yeah, that's
one or the other, whichever, it's fine. So I like set my alarm so like if I fell asleep in the movie, I wouldn't crack. Like what if somebody forgot to come in and clean the movie? So I set my alarm anyway just to make sure. But so I go to the bathroom halfway through the movie. And then I look at my phone, and there's an alert that says the plane has landed. So I was kind of confused. I'm tired anyway at that point. And I'm like halfway in this movie called like Widows. It's okay. It was all right. It was fine. So I see this text come in or some notification that the flight had landed. So I'm like, and that it was scheduled to go off on time at that point. Well, on time meant I had to be at the airport, and it was gone in like 30 minutes, and I was still 15 minutes away from the airport. I'm like, I don't think there's any way I'm going to make this, but I'm going to fly. I'm going to fly like hell and see if I can make it. Well, I get to the airport, and I had either misread it or it was an incorrect text, and we were still there till 2:45 in the morning. So anyway.
So wait a minute. You didn't get to watch the whole movie? You left mid-movie.
But I don't feel bad. Like, it's not like I'm going to go back and watch. It was just like a placeholder movie. I didn't care. It was fine. It was actually... Okay. It was fine. It got a little bit slow, so I wasn't all that upset to leave the movie.
I just like how like you have to kill time. The first thing you do is let's go to the casino. That's great.
That was the first thing. I mean,
good morals
like,
there, Jeff.
No, that was it. And again, it was like a smaller casino. It was fine. It did the job for a little while, and then the movie did the job, and now I'm home for the week and catching up and certainly some things that have happened here over the last few days, week. I think we start with the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls, Evan. And it's a mess.
I can't believe we're not going to start with Robert Williams and his defensive effort against Anthony Davis last night. But
that was impressive. But I think that's probably further down the list. But Big Bob Williams did look the part. He looked like his freshman Texas A&M version of Bob Williams.
He looked good.
He did look good. All right, who does not look good? The Chicago Bulls.
Yeah.
They are an absolute effing train wreck right now. And there's no other way to say it. You know, they fired Fred Hoiberg. They gave the interim job to Jim Boylan, who I've known a long time. He was actually a little-known fact. Here's a little-known fact on Jim Boylan. If Sean Miller had turned down the Arizona job, which he actually did at first, and then they went back to him and convinced Sean Miller to take the job. That was about 10 years ago at Arizona. Jim Boylan was the next guy in line to get the Arizona job.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well,
how about that?
Instead of that, he's now working for the Bulls, and the players are trying to get him kicked off the team. Basically, at this point, it's a disaster. I don't know if you've seen some of the either the scores or the defensive efforts from this team lately, but it's a crime. They played Boston the other night, and Boston had no bigs basically outside of Daniel Tice. They got smoked 133-77. It was coming off a win. I don't know how they beat Oklahoma City. There's you look at all the L's in a row, then there's just one win, and they beat Oklahoma City, who has the best record in the Western Conference. It makes no sense. This team is a disaster. The only thing that if I were a Bulls fan, the only thing I'm taking away is, okay, at least Zach LaVine can play. Lauri Markkanen, maybe a little bit of a step back. We're excited about him, and Wendell Carter is great. Other than that, they have Robin Lopez who's a goofball and nobody else. It's a mess. It's a disaster. And honestly, Jeff, I feel bad for Fred Hoiberg here. I mean, at what point was he given a team that could actually do anything? He was never given a team that could actually play. He feuded with Jimmy Butler from the beginning. They got rid of Jimmy Butler. They decided to rebuild, which is okay. It's fine. And then Hoiberg can kind of, give his input on what team he wants to run. Instead of that, now he's gone. Boylan's in, and nobody's happy. It's a mess. It's a disaster. I haven't seen anything. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of these disastrous Knicks years. You know what I'm talking about? Where the Knicks are just so comically bad that just they're a back page, headline every single time they take the court. Chicago feels the same way.
Well, here's the thing. Number one, Gar Forman and John Paxson gave Fred Hoiberg the wrong type of players. That's number one. Is Fred Hoiberg needs guys that can space the court, move the ball. He's an offensive-minded coach, and they didn't give him enough guys that could actually make shots. So they set Fred Hoiberg up to fail. I don't know if he would have succeeded anyway. I think Fred Hoiberg is a great, great guy. And I actually think if you put the right players around him, I mean, again, I'll use Golden State as an example.
Oh, no, there you go.
You and I could coach Golden State. That doesn't matter. But Fred Hoiberg with those types of guys, skilled guys who can move the ball, who can shoot the ball, he would have been just fine in the NBA because he actually does have the personality in a sense, although he might be a little bit too nice to coach in the NBA. That's what they're looking for. No ego guys. Fred Hoiberg's got zero ego. And it's kind of, I don't want to say a country club, but it's the opposite of Jim Boylan right now. That's the problem, is that now you flipped it and you said, all right, we're getting rid of Hoiberg and we're going with the complete polar opposite of Hoiberg, and that is Jim Boylan, who's a wannabe Tom Izzo. He was an assistant under Izzo for a few years. After he left the NBA, went back into the NBA after 4 years as the head coach at University Utah, and he went to one NCAA tournament, and then he's been back in the NBA, and he's old school. He's kind of a poor man's Tom Izzo, and I just don't know if that works anymore, especially with younger guys in the NBA that are used to one way, used to Hoiberg. And now you start to kind of crack the whip with the team. You got to ease your way into it. Now, I talked to a couple players who played for him last night in the past. They like Jim Boylan. It's not that they don't like Jim Boylan as a guy. They think, again, he's a good coach. But, again, you're going from the complete opposite end of the spectrum from a guy in Hoiberg who's not going to practice a ton. He's not going to jump you. He's not going to, dress you down or anything like that. Not the greatest communicator in terms of a guy who's always going to be around, Boylan will be around a little bit more. He will. Now, the best thing about this, Evan, in a way, like, they want a tank. They need a tank.
Yeah.
But not this way. That's the problem. Not this way, because it gives the franchise an even worse look than it's had.
It's never a good idea to be like the team that's getting trolled by the Sacramento Kings, but that's exactly what happened the other night. Like the Kings, who have been like a model of consistently mediocre to awful the past, I don't know how many years. How many years have they drafted in the top 7 in a row? It's been a disaster in Sacramento. When they're making fun of you, like, you had a problem. With Chicago, like with Jim Boylan especially, like in I saw this quote the other day. It might have been yesterday, might have been the day before. It was something about, and I'm paraphrasing. You can't act like Greg Popovich if you're not actually Greg Popovich. Like, he has the clout in order to. Greg Popovich can do what he wants. Yeah. Like, he can discipline. Yeah, you got to earn it.
You haven't earned anything, Jim Boylan. That's the problem. Right. You've earned no juice, even with this young group of Chicago Bulls players.
Yeah. And it's not like, again, you're not Tom, like you mentioned Tom Izzo a bunch. You're not Tom Izzo. You're not Mike Krzyzewski. You're not any one of these, coaches that has been around the game forever and had success, a good long run of success for a long time. You're not one of these coaches. You're not even, look, you have to know what your place is. And like, I hate to compare, Brad Stevens to anybody just because of how good he is. But he's a guy that understood very quickly, like, okay, this is a players' league. I have to talk to my players a certain way to motivate them a certain way. And Steve Kerr's the same way. I mean, Steve Kerr ended up in, he hadn't had the best, track record before. He comes in to Golden State, right? And all of a sudden they go from Mark Jackson, who they completely despise at certain points, to Steve Kerr, who just understands how to correctly motivate that team and get that team rolling. I mean, how long ago where Mike D'Antoni is in New York fighting with Carmelo Anthony every single day, and then he gets to Houston, and all of a sudden now he's a great coach again. I mean, it's just, you have to learn exactly how to talk to your players to motivate them the right way. And Jim Boylan's just saying, you know what? No, it's my way or the highway. It doesn't work like that. It's a players' league. The NBA has always been a players' league and will continue to be a players' league long after Jim Boylan and long after everybody else. And it's not like they have awesome players. The Bulls don't have a lot of talent right now, but there's some guys in that team that are interesting. And they've had some, like, the fact that Zach LaVine has come back from all of his injuries and become this unbelievably efficient scorer is shocking to me. But other than outside of him, Wendell Carter, I mean, look at this. I mean, Raleigh Atkins, Ryan Arcidiacono, Cristiano Felicio, Shaq Harrison. I mean, look at this roster.
Well,
here's a disaster.
Well, here's the thing. All right, I agree with you to some extent. Like, I didn't like the Jabari Parker signing. I thought that was right. And Ryan Arcidiacono is your starting point guard. With all due respect to Arch, who I love, he's a great backup. But Chris Dunn is supposed to be your starting point guard. He hasn't played really all year. Bobby Portis is supposed to be your starting 4-man. He hasn't really played all year. So you add those two to Zach LaVine, to Lauri Markkanen, and at least you've got 4 like good, solid NBA players. Wendell Carter, I think, is going to be a good NBA player. So it's not like you don't have a decent young core. And if you do tank this year, let's say you do get a top 3 pick, and you get one of these Duke guys, right? You get, I don't know what it's, RJ Barrett, or Cam Reddish or Zion, one of those 3. I don't know who you get, but if you get one of them, and then you hire a coach, a guy that, to me, you need a guy in between Fred Hoiberg and Jim Boylan. I don't know who it is, but probably a younger guy who's been in the NBA, who can connect with players and can coach. They're around. And then, to me, get rid of Gar Forman and Pax.
No, that ain't happening, though. They've made so many mistakes over the years. The fact that it doesn't happen by now, it's just never going to happen.
But, like, come on, how many hires are you going to have here that fail? Like, listen, Gar Forman, that's Fred Hoiberg's guy. That's who hired Fred Hoiberg. So it's like the athletic director who hires the coach, right? Like, at some point, isn't the AD culpable? Isn't the AD the one who should go? Like, I'll give you a good example. At Wake Forest, Ron Wellman hired Jeff Bizdelik, who failed, and now has hired Danny Manning, who is not doing well at all and is on the verge of, it's spiraling at Wake Forest. And somehow Ron Wellman is keeping his job. And it's like, eventually, like, Gar Forman and Paxson, like, you got to go. You gotta clean slate. Clean slate. Start it over this year. Find somebody. I had somebody tell me yesterday. They said, here's a scenario I could see down the road at some point. It's like Doug Collins running the Bulls and Chris Collins coaching the Bulls at some point.
Oh, there you go.
And Chris Collins he hasn't done enough yet. He got Northwestern to the NCAA tournament once. Then they really sucked last year and underachieved. He hasn't done enough to warrant that job, but his type of personality and ability to connect with players, a younger generation, like Hoiberg was younger in a sense, but he wasn't really loose. He wasn't a good guy, just wasn't a guy who was going to kind of grind it and be around it all the time. Boylan's kind of the opposite in a sense, like he'll be around it, but he's more of a ball coach and a little bit gruff, doesn't necessarily look the part. Again, good guy. I like him, but I don't think he's right for this group either. So the Bulls, I don't know where the hell they go. It's not pretty. Paxson and Foreman have kind of said that they would like to keep Jim Boylan beyond this year. I don't see any way that happens. None.
Come on.
None. Right. Agreed.
You'd be better off you and me coaching the team right now, Jeff.
It's bad.
It's bad.
So the number 2 storyline, I think, this week is the impending return of Boogie. And he's been assigned to like a rehab in Santa Cruz where, believe it or not, his brother plays. Boogie's not supposed to play, I don't think, for the G League team, but he's going to rehab with him, work out with him, and kind of bounce back and forth between Golden State. I don't know how long it's going to be before he makes his debut with Golden State. Sounds like we're, probably a matter of, weeks or somewhere in that vicinity. But, coming back from that torn Achilles tendon last January, this is the most intriguing thing for me. Like, I haven't been all that intrigued by Golden State this year, partially because Steph and Draymond have missed a bunch of games, and partially because I just want to see what they look like with Boogie. Like, isn't that kind of the big question mark with Golden State right now is like, how's it going to work? Are there enough basketballs? And everybody wants to see how Boogie and Draymond coexist and how many technicals they pick up within the last half of this season. But, I think it's going to be just fine. I do. I think with those guys around Boogie, could it blow up? Sure. Absolutely could blow up. What if something happens again with Draymond and KD? My guess is, does Boogie pick a side here? Is he the peacemaker? Probably depends on the day. But it's an intriguing storyline to watch is how does this whole team fit together? Are they even better than they've been over the last few years if they gel together? Because they've never had a big like Boogie. We know that. They've never been anybody close.
Yeah, the Warriors have been interesting. They've been hurt. They've had suspensions. They haven't been the dominant team that we're used to in terms of the regular season. I mean, they used to roll teams over the regular season. Now, not so much. I am curious what he looks like when he gets back, just because from a health standpoint, like they might need him to be really good. Like the depth on this team has taken a hit over the years just because
let's not get carried away. If he doesn't come back and play a single minute, they still are the clear favorite.
Yeah, but I think it's closer this year than it's been. Like
but
last year,
who?
obviously.
But by
who? I think there are I think Toronto's not bad. I think Boston's getting their act together. I mean, I don't think in the West it was going to really challenge them. I mean, we'll see with playoff LeBron. I highly doubt it. And that Lakers team isn't totally done yet either anyway. I mean, they are the most talented team in the league. Don't get me wrong. But, like, the depth in this team isn't the same. I mean, you're relying on – they have 3 guys that score a ton of games, Steph, Durant, and Clay, right? After that, they don't have a ton of options. I mean, it's not like Draymond lights the world on fire from anywhere on the court. It's not like he's having a great offensive year. Jonas Jerebko is in the one of their top 5 scorers on the team. Like I know they have as much talent, as much top end talent as you would want, right? I get it, trust me. But I mean, some of these other teams are really good. Like I like the way Toronto's playing. Like I'm surprised Nick Nurse has acclimated so quickly to the NBA. His team is unbelievable, don't get me wrong. And I know Kyle Lowry's having a rough go of it right now, but they've been unbelievable so far. I think Mike Budenholzer's done a great job
with Milwaukee. And if you get playoff Chris Middleton, who went against the Celtics last year in those 7 games and was arguably the best player on the court for either side, like that's a scary proposition with him and Giannis because you're not sure what Giannis is capable of. He's an alien, right? Boston's making their way back. You look out west. I mean, I again, the West is a little bit more interesting after Golden State. You have Denver's been kind of a fun team this year. I don't think they're going to do anything, but they've been a fun team this year. Oklahoma City has a great defense, but in the playoffs with Russ, I don't know. And then with the Lakers, again, we'll see what playoff LeBron brings and what that team looks like at the end of the year because I don't think it's going to look like the same team it is right now. But I think the Eastern Conference is a little bit better than it has been. I think when you put Kawhi, you take him out of the West and put him in the East, he's been arguably as good of an MVP candidate as Giannis has been. And you have, instead of having, only one top 10 player in the Eastern Conference, now you have a couple spread out. I think it's a little bit more deep in the East than it's ever been. And with Golden State, again, they just rely on those 3 guys so much that and if one of them gets hurt, you're really screwed.
I'm not going to let you disrespect Alfonso McKinney, Kevon Looney, Quinn Cook. I mean, you can't do this. You cannot get away with disrespecting the second unit of the Golden State Warriors like this.
They're good. Okay. McKinney's been one of the best stories of all year. He's it's incredible what he's done. It really is. And again, Golden State finds another gem somewhere. It's like, okay, it's almost like the Spurs at this point. They just find
the Spurs.
Jordan Bell in the second round. Like, what the hell are the Chicago? Speaking of Chicago Bulls, what are the Chicago Bulls doing, giving Jordan Bell to the Golden State Warriors? It's a player they could have used.
I just think, listen. When you've got Steph, KD, Clay, Draymond, Boogie as your 5, and then you go off the bench with the Iggy, Sean Livingston, Jerebko. It's fine. I mean, listen, you don't need to go 10 deep if they're all healthy. I mean, you're playing 8 guys. I mean, you're playing 5 guys the majority of the minutes, but 7 when you add Iggy and Livingston, the majority of the minutes at the end of the day when it matters. And then you throw in the McKinneys and the Quinn Cooks and the Jerebkos, you're just fine. You're good enough.
In past years where, if one of those guys gets hurt, like if Steph gets hurt, they might be able to overcome that. I don't know if they can do that this year if Boogie's not totally healthy. That's going to be my point.
And that's the key, right? I mean, Achilles injuries are tricky. They're more serious than a torn ACL in terms of coming back from. So, the positive for Boogie is it's not like he has to do too much, right? I mean, he really doesn't. He'll rebound, he'll step out, he'll make threes. He won't defend a whole lot, you wouldn't think. I mean, maybe he will. I mean, maybe this will be the best thing that ever happened to Boogie because he'll be held accountable by other guys on his team now, so he won't be quite as lazy on the defensive end at times. I don't know. That's going to be the fun part, right, to watch. What Boogie do we get? Do we get a more mature Boogie? And I think we will on some nights again. And I've had my issues with him over the years. But I think, there are some days where he's great. And there are some days where, again, you watch him and you're just so frustrated because he always leaves you wanting more, especially on the defensive end of the floor where he just, goes through the motions at times. But I don't see anybody beating this team. I just don't. I mean, not with him coming back. And, he doesn't have to be 100%. He can be 75% as long as those other guys are healthy. Now, if they're not healthy, and they lose a Steph or somebody like that, then you need Boogie to be closer to 100. But Boogie at 75 is way better than anything else they've had there in the middle. He's way better. They've had Zaza
Pachulia and Kevin Looney and another myriad of. They had Andrew Bogut for a while. They've had some interesting guys down there. Boogie is way more talented than all of them. The chemistry from a locker room standpoint is also what intrigues me. But I'm rooting for Boogie so hard. I'm a big DeMarcus Cousins talent fan, and I just want him to just figure it out and have like that, come to Jesus moment where, now it all clicks for Boogie. And now he's just, because when he was in Sacramento putting up the numbers he was putting up, I mean, it was a marvel of what he could do. He was arguably the most complete center in the league when his head was on straight. Yeah. But unfortunately, his head's never on straight for more than, 3 weeks in a row. But when he wanted to play, he would play with an edge. He would rebound the crap out of the basketball. He was almost unstoppable in the low post. He can stretch it out a little bit to, before he, added 3-point range. He was a knockdown shooter from about 15 to 18 feet, spread it out to 3-point range. He's a pretty good 3-point shooter, has decent vision for a guy that size. And when he's motivated the right way, can play defense. So I want that guy to come together and if it's on Golden State, it's on Golden State, whatever. But I want him to be good. The NBA is better with more good players in it. And DeMarcus Cousins has as much talent as any guy that size in the league. And if he's going to be, he's going to come back and figure his stuff out and then move on somewhere else and be a linchpin somewhere else, that's only better for basketball. I like good basketball. I'm rooting for DeMarcus Cousins.
You know what?
I'm just not sure what you're getting when he comes back.
I kind of am rooting for DeMarcus now, and again, we've had our issues. I think I told one story.
Yeah, with Chris Haynes. Yeah,
I'll give you another. An earlier one with Boogie was, so I'm covering a game at Madison Square Garden. Kentucky's playing. Must have been early days Champions Classic. Back in November, early November, and I don't know why they were there, but DeMarcus and John Wall were both there. So maybe. I don't know. I don't know what was going on, but they were both in the building. So after the game, I always forget in college, what teams have open locker rooms and what don't. Okay. Now I haven't gotten along with Calipari at this point now in 12, 13 years, really. So after the game, like I said, I forget. Michigan State's got an open locker room. I remember that, but most of the other schools, I just don't remember. So I walked down the hallway. And the doors open after the game to the Kentucky locker room. Calipari is still talking to all the reporters in the main room, doing his kind of press conference after the game. And I generally don't stand there for the press conferences because anything good, everybody's going to get it. So I go in the locker room, I'll mill around, whatever I can get one-on-one, I want to get it. So I see the door open in the back hallway of the Garden for the Kentucky locker room. So I just walk in. So I walk in, and the first person I see to the right, I believe it was Anthony Davis. And I just start talking to him for a minute. And not realizing there's nobody else in the locker room other than me. I'm the only reporter in there. And I kind of see John Wall to the left out of the corner of my eye, and I'm talking to Anthony Davis. And then I see these eyes bearing down on me to the right. And I kind of look over, and there's DeMarcus right sitting next to Anthony Davis. I just didn't even realize he was right there. So our eyes meet each other. He looks at me and he goes, I don't like you, right? And I just look at him. I go, yeah, I know. And then I think about it. And I'm like, oh shit. He could kick the living shit out of me right here. And there's nobody to vouch that it happened. There's nobody in this locker room who will back me up that it happened if he took a swing at me right here, which obviously he didn't. But I saw John Wall, who I've known forever. And after I was done talking, I think they kicked me out right away. When they saw me in there, I think that the SI, sports information director or whoever was like, yeah, you can't be in here. Get the hell out of here. This isn't open locker room. Right. So I did, but it was pretty funny. So anyway, our relationship has changed over the years. Now I do root for Boogie, especially coming off an injury like this, and going to be very, very interesting to see kind of what he gives them and if they right the ship. I mean, listen. They're 19-9, and they haven't played well at all. And they've had, Draymond's missed half the year, and Steph's missed basically half the year. So yeah. They'll be just fine. Nobody's crying for them. They'll be just fine. Quick break to tell you today's show is brought to you by The Athletic. If you haven't heard about The Athletic by now, you must be living under a rock. These guys have been crushing every element of sports coverage imaginable. Whether you're looking for specific local coverage with beat guys, sports discussed under a national lens, or anything and everything in between, you got to make sure to take a look at The Athletic. No pop-ups, no ads, just high-quality content waiting behind every single click. Zach Harper, Frank Isola, Sam Amick, who's a guest on the show, Shams Charania, who's also a guest on the show, have you covered on everything NBA related. College is more your style? Then make sure you check out my guys Seth Davis, Brian Hamilton, Dane O'Neill, Sam Vecini does both. You can't get quality content like this anywhere else. 600, 750 new articles a week. Who else is pushing out quality content like this? If you haven't signed up yet, take advantage of this deal because it's not going to last forever. Go to theathletic.com/Goodman to get 40% off your monthly subscription. That's a subscription for less than $3 a month just by going to theathletic.com/Goodman. Shams, Amick, Harper, all for less than $3 a month. Sign me up. Sign yourself up too. Athletic.com/Goodman. A team that might not be just fine, Evan. The Houston Rockets.
No.
Holy shit. Like, I didn't think they were as good as what they showed last year and was shocked. But I certainly didn't think they'd be as bad as they are this year. I mean, it shocks me way more that they're this bad through the first 25 games. They're 11-14 right now, not even in the playoffs.
They're the second worst team in the West. They went from the best record in the West to the second worst team in the West. That's a dramatic difference. That is dramatic. And two of the top three teams two of the top teams that I picked to finish 1, 2, 3 in the West, Golden State, fine.
You like
Houston,
Utah.
awful. Utah, terrible. So I'm doing really well in my predictions so far this year.
I was on with Utah. Remember, I fought you on Utah.
Yeah. I was right on Milwaukee. I'll take the Milwaukee one.
Yes,
I
was wrong. I was totally wrong on Milwaukee. And with Houston, I've never been a huge believer. I just haven't. But again, obviously, I had to shut up last year because they were so good. And if Chris Paul doesn't get hurt, who knows what happens at the end there against Golden State. Here's my take. I mean, it's not that hard to figure out, I guess, what's going on. You know, I saw Houston play earlier in the year, probably 3 weeks ago or so. And back then, I asked D'Antoni, you know, what was wrong. And back then, it was the excuses of we're hurt. You know, we've never had all our guys. Harden was hurt a little bit. Chris Paul was hurt and suspended. It was one after the other. But you look at it and you say, all right, like Harden's doing his job. You know, he doesn't guard, but you can't say anything negative about James Harden on the offensive end. He's been terrific. Chris Paul has not. And I spoke to somebody last night that's in that organization. And he told me, he said, listen, Chris Paul is not the same player right now. He's not. He's missing shots at the end of the game the other night, free throws and a layup. He got beat on a defensive possession in crunch time. He's not shooting it nearly as well as he had. He's almost 34 years old. You know, is this contract that they sign him to, is this going to be something that hinders this Rockets organization? Because if Chris Paul doesn't play at a high level, they don't have enough around him anymore, especially, you know, he's not guarding like he usually does. And maybe he's pacing himself a little bit more. I don't know. I mean, can't pace yourself when you're 11-14. You got to start bringing it every night. But, you know, to me, they don't have enough around him now. They got rid of Trevor Ariza and Luc Pamute on the defensive end. And P.J. Tucker, how about this stat? Ready for this one?
Yep.
Last 3 games, he's played like 93 minutes. He scored 8 points.
Oh, no.
8 points.
Yeah,
and James Ennis can't really score. So you're talking about 2 guys in Tucker and Ennis who can't score. Clint Capella is your second leading scorer. Well, Clint Capella is not a skill guy. He's a role guy. So what do you have right now? If you don't have, you know, the best version of Chris Paul, and I think really he's been the key here. He's been the biggest reason why they're not what they were a year ago. I mean, again, you had a reason, the defense, and, you know, bringing back Jeff Bzdelik has not been the answer. You can bring back whatever the hell coach you want. If you don't have the personnel and the players to buy in and do it, it doesn't matter who the coach is.
Well, I think you're missing a big part of this team that is apparently going to, you know, they're going to change it up a little bit, their starting lineup. Eric Gordon hasn't been as good as he was last year.
No,
Eric Gordon was like one of the best, if not the best, sixth man in the whole league last year. You know, was shooting 43% from the field, 36% from 3. Those numbers this year, 37% from the field, 31% from 3. He hasn't been nearly as good. He was a huge reason why they were so good, because he could come off the bench and spell either Harden or Paul, and they wouldn't lose any guard production. And they haven't had – I mean, you talk about Harden has been unbelievable. The other 2 guys, Gordon and Paul, have been just, shells of the guys they were last year. And so if you're not going to have the guys that were really great for you last year not be as good, and you lost some of your depth, you're going to suffer. Like in a time of the year where you look at the numbers put up by teams this year, everybody is up on offense across the entire league except for one team, Houston. Houston was the second leading scoring team in the NBA last year. I got it in front of me right now. Hang on a second. Last year, in terms of points per game, the number 2 team in the league was Houston, 112.4. Guess where they are this year? They're towards the bottom of the barrel. They're in the bottom 10 of offenses, which I never would have thought imaginable considering the talent head of the team, who their head coach was, who their point guard is. They're now 21st in the league in terms of total offense. Wow. I mean, that's crazy. Staggering. That's staggering, and they only lost a couple of guys, but those were key guys. How many people during the summer said this Houston team is making a huge mistake? Those 2 guys were huge. Everybody,
but this is the problem I have with Daryl Morey, Evan. It's all about the numbers, and how about intangibles? How about the intangibles that Trevor Ariza and Luc Mbah a Moute bring to the court? Not just defense is one thing. I guess you can identify that and with numbers. But intangibles, and that's my biggest problem with a numbers geek like Daryl Morey, is you got to look at more than that. You can't let him walk and then bring in Carmelo Anthony. What the hell are you doing? Everybody in the world knew it was the wrong move to make, yet he made it anyway.
I don't know how far they got the Jimmy Butler sweepstakes. I have no idea if those first 4 first-round picks were true. I have no idea, but I mean, that was the trade that I thought they really needed to make, and they needed to go out and make some sort of splash, and they couldn't pull it off. And for Daryl, a team last year that again went toe-to-toe with Golden State and is, a really bad, shooting performance from 3-point range away, or Chris Paul injury away from going to the NBA Finals and playing LeBron. I mean, that's how close that was, and they've gone from that to this. And how many times do you see this? And I tell you right now, you see a lot in football where if you're the team that's the runner-up, not making it almost dismantles you completely, and then you just fail to get back to anything. Like the example this year is both the Super Bowl winners, the Philadelphia Eagles, but you look at the 2 teams that made it to the AFC and NFC championship games. The Jacksonville Jaguars are a disaster. They're 4-9 on the year or whatever in Jacksonville. They don't have a quarterback. They've fired guys in their coaching staff. And then the flip side, the Vikings, they're a mess, and they scored 7 points last night on Monday Night Football. This is what happens. And Houston was so close to making the NBA Finals, and now they just seem like a shell of themselves. I don't know how a team that was second in scoring last year and was miles ahead of everybody and taking all these threes and were the darlings of it, the analytics era of the NBA, have gone from 2 to 21. That is a dramatic finish. And I didn't think anybody would especially a Mike D'Antoni team who's, known for his offensive teams. Those Phoenix Suns teams were revolutionary and tried the same thing in New York. Didn't work out, but at least tried it, and then came back to Houston and won NBA Coach of the Year. And now they're 21st in offense. I mean, they've never been a good defensive team. They have guys on the team that can play defense. Like Clint Capella can play defense. PJ Tucker can play defense. But just the offensive firepower isn't there. Their numbers across the board in almost every single category are down. And I mean, there's the only explanation I have is the personnel's different, and these guys just don't gel well together. You mentioned chemistry. That's a huge, huge part of succeeding in the NBA.
How about this? So Chris Paul, his contract next year, $35.5 million. 19-20, $38.5 million. 2021, $41+ million.
Oh no.
21-22, he's got a player option, $44 million.
That's awful. That's like the John Wall contract, but at least John Wall's young.
Right. It's going to be bad because he's going to be 36, 37 at the end of this thing, and it's going to totally hamper this organization unless they can, maybe LeBron will take him on, right? LeBron loves him. Maybe he'll take him on even if Chris Paul can't do much. All right, last thing before we leave. I ran into Tobias Harris the other night. He was playing Phoenix the next night and watching his Tennessee Vols beat Gonzaga, number 1 Gonzaga. So I talked to Tobias for a little while. Known him since he was about 15, 16 years old. And did I ever think he'd be doing what he's doing now? No, nobody did. Remember, he turned down, I think, an $80 million deal this past offseason to stay with the Clippers in hopes of getting a max contract. And everybody laughed. Everybody laughed at Tobias Harris and said, what an idiot. I mean, this is a guy who's been with, the Bucks and the Magic and Detroit, and now he's on his 4th team already. He's got to be 26, 27. fourth team. How do you turn down that contract? He bet on himself, and man, he is crushing it this year. And not just him, but there's other guys on the Clippers team that have them as probably the best story through the first third of the season of anybody so far. I mean, the Clippers have been great, and they're doing it with Tobias, who's having a career year, and Gallinaro. I mean, Lou Williams is really not, like, his scoring has kind of subsided a little bit. They don't need him quite as much because Montrezl Harrell and Tobias Harris and Gallo and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, they've been really good. We talked to Avery Bradley in the preseason on this podcast, and we thought it was going to be like the Avery Bradley, Patrick Beverley show as a starting guard unit, and they're great defensively. They just can't score enough, so it's hard to play them together all the time. Instead, you've got Lou Williams with the firepower. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is coming a lot quicker than we all thought. But Tobias, the one thing when I talked to him, he was saying, listen, I could see it out of this Tennessee squad, and it's similar to what we have with the Clippers, is it's chemistry, man. So much of it is about chemistry, and they fit well together. They understand their roles. They know they're not the most talented team out there, but and they play with that chip on their shoulder. Most of those guys are tough kids. Like, Tobias may not look like it, but he's a pretty tough kid. Lou Williams is a killer. Montrezl Harrell's a killer. Avery Bradley and Beverly give him that toughness. So you got that, and I think Doc likes this group because, again, they're easy to coach in a sense that they just want to play hard.
I've never forgiven Tobias Harris for choosing Tennessee over Syracuse, so that was a rough one. He did it in the middle of like New York City in Times Square, and I was like, oh, he's just gonna pick Syracuse. This is great. He had orange on. There's a bunch of guys with Syracuse shirts on in the background. They were really excited. Then he picked Tennessee, and they all like just walked off camera and were really upset. But no, they've been really solid. Tobias Harris is out of his mind right now. I mean, I know there are other guys in the MVP discussion, obviously, with Giannis and Kawhi Leonard kind of leading the way with somebody from Golden State. But I mean, you could make the argument Tobias Harris has meant more to the Clippers than anybody has meant to their team. And, that's a Doc Rivers.
Do they sustain it? Where do the Clippers, in your opinion?
Well, Danilo Gallinari is probably going to get hurt at some point. I mean, the fact that he's played 25 games of the 26 possible games they have is pretty shocking to me.
Did they make the playoffs? Did they make the playoffs?
I think it's definitely possible. They've been. I mean, look at the West. The West is crazy.
Right.
The West has so many. Like the Kings are in contention here.
But one of, if not both of Utah and Houston end up making a little bit of a run here to the playoffs. So who falls out? I mean, Dallas is in there right now. Memphis is in there. The Clippers are in there. Those are the three teams you would say, like, all right, like Dallas isn't making the playoffs at the end of the day. They're not.
LA is better than Dallas, and LA, you can make the arguments better than Memphis. Memphis, right. Although they've had a terrific year from Mike Conley, and they've had a terrific year from Gasol, and Jaren Jackson has been just ridiculous, and that's been really fun to watch. But I think the Clippers are a little bit better than those two teams, just from a chemistry standpoint. And Tobias Harris, I mean, again, it's just been unbelievable. If Gallinari can stay healthy, and that's always been the thing with Gallinari, can he ever stay healthy? They're definitely going to make the playoffs. I don't think that's far-fetched at all. I think Dallas, being involved is incredible, and that's just a tip of that cap to how good Luka Doncic is right away. And I don't think Portland's going to hang around the 7th seed either. I think they're really talented. They'll make it run. Like, I think you could usually put Portland, where the Lakers are right now, the Lakers where the Clippers are right now, and move the Clippers down to the 8-7 spot, and that's probably where this will end up. But I mean, there's the West is really, really competitive right now, all the way to if Sacramento's 4 games out. I can't believe Sacramento's above 500. That's shocking to me.
Amazing.
The Spurs. I don't see Greg Popovich not finishing a year above 500, so I think they'll come back to the pack a little bit more. Again, you're right about Utah and Houston; they'll probably make a run at some point. There's so many interesting teams in the West that why not LA? Why can't the Clippers make the playoffs? I mean, it would be the craziest thing. I'll tell you that right now. It would be the craziest thing.
All right. Well, listen. Thanks again for joining us. Another edition of Good and Plenty in the Books. Remember, you can subscribe on iTunes. CLNS Media, Stitcher. You can find me at Goodman Hoops on Twitter. Also find me on WatchStadium.com. I promise my voice will be better next week, Evan. I'm going to get some sleep this week. And again, every Tuesday, NBA edition of the Good and Plenty podcast. Every Thursday, the College Hoops edition. Thanks Today's show brought to you by The Athletic. Again, you can save 40% off your monthly subscription today. Going to theathletic.com/Goodman. We'll see you next week. Good and plenty.